When it comes to manufacturing, the foreign players have remained the same for some time. Throughout Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Asia, the manufacturing industry is strong. Several decades of focus has allowed Western nations to benefit from the labour and capital differences in places such as Indonesia. However, this is beginning to change, and this change is the marking of a new era. We are on the brink of a major geopolitical shift. Africa is due to overtake Southeast Asia within the next decade as the world's leading offshore region for manufacturing. Looking at this from a statistical perspective, the power shift in Africa was evidently going to happen at some point, and it was only a matter of time before a continent once overlooked by many strategists would become the center of attention on the global stage. The primary reason for this rapid focus shift towards Africa is demographics. Over the next 25 years or so, the continent is likely to see massive growth. The seemingly exponential trajectory is promising for the rest of the world and Africa itself, as it opens up many new opportunities when it comes to manufacturing and expansion. These rapid demographic changes, alongside growing benefits for foreign nations, means that the rush towards offshore manufacturing in Africa will come with an exchange. And that exchange will be increasing diplomatic ties with the North African powers, or the gatekeepers of Africa. Among those being Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. As it currently stands, the European Union is Africa's largest trading partner, with almost 40% of all exports from the continent, and likewise Africa imports a fair amount from the European Union. If all continues on the same trajectory, which it has been on for some time, this is likely to remain the same, adjusted for increased overall trading as time goes on. But for those with enough foresight, the emergence of an African manufacturing hub was a certainty. In fact, most of the international powers had projected that the African continent would see an upswing in economic stability and export opportunity within the next decade, and as such were more than willing to sacrifice short-term economic gains for longer-term future ambitions. However, one nation in particular has made it evident it's willing to go the extra mile to gain future leverage over the rest of the world when it comes to utilizing this growing industry in Africa, and that is China. As it currently stands, the European Union is Africa's largest trading partner, as previously mentioned, taking almost 40% of all exports from the continent. Conversely, African nations import the majority of their resources from Europe. For China, the opportunities are vast, yet as it currently stands, import and export percentages still sit in the single digits. From an outsider's perspective, Africa and Europe don't appear to be changing anytime soon, as the mutual benefit of trade are set for a smooth trajectory upwards. However, China has one major advantage over Europe, if it can secure it, and that is trade routes. As China will most likely be utilizing similar modes of transportation through the African continent as everyone else, the question is primarily this: will China be able to secure a regional influence strong enough to be the primary beneficiary of these new opportunities and trade routes? Historically, trade between the African nations has been problematic. Colonial powers preferred more secured borders along their regional boundaries, opting for fewer road links, and as such, international trade was far more limited in scope. This was primarily done to protect internal trade and nullify reliance on surrounding nations in the case of war. A good example of this is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which, during times of increased conflict, has been left suffering due to vital links between itself and the outside world being cut off. The destruction of infrastructure also meant that much of the trade running through the Congo, which links the east and west coast of Africa, was cut off, with substantial consequences. For this reason, a broad goal such as continental, multinational trade routes comes off as risky and ambitious. It presents what appears to be an equal risk to reward. On the one hand, these multinational systems will decrease domestic self-sufficiency and open up a Pandora's box when it comes to conflict along the trade corridors. At the same time, they also present an opportunity for international cooperation, and likely a swifter, joint approach to conflict resolution to prevent weak links from forming along the network. After all, the combined interests of anyone using these trade routes is to keep them secure, and as such, the trade corridors through Africa would be of top priority. As it stands, the European Union sees future trade corridors through North Africa as a cautiously optimistic ambition. The proposed model would expand upon the Trans-African Highway network to provide efficiency and security across the upper half of the African continent. What is important to understand about these trade corridors is the multifaceted political challenges that surround them. As all of these proposed corridors span multiple nations, for example, running from the Balkans across the Mediterranean into Egyptian ports, then into Sudan, the routes become risky. The more borders you cross with such a trade corridor, the more problems you are likely to encounter. Historical ties have been the primary advantage up to this point for Europe. For example, given its history, France has had ease of access to Morocco, and from there has had few major issues when it comes to funding new infrastructure. For this reason, China's future in the western segment of Africa, such as Morocco, remains uncertain, as French ties to Morocco have also been beneficial to the rest of the European Union and the United States, and as a result, most of the Western world. As such, China's approach appears to be that of appeasement, as they have pledged to develop a new economic hub in the north of the country for an estimated $11 billion. Alongside Europe and China, the other major players in this race for expansion and influence include Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, all of whom have begun competing for infrastructure deals, particularly in Tunisia and Algeria, where the economic potential has been projected to be the strongest. The reason for this is complex, but at its core, the competing nations vying for superiority hope to secure the only one of the corridors which connects the Mediterranean to Lagos. This would be extremely advantageous in the long run, in contrast to securing the other corridors, as Nigeria, apart from already standing as a powerful hub in Western Africa, is projected to double its population within the next 25 years, and will likely play a central role in this economic expansion. This is where China's long-term strategic approach has been put into effect. As it stands, the primary competitors in the central north are Italy, Turkey, and China, all of whom are trying to please the Tunisian and Algerian governments. Turkey's approach in recent years has been straight to the point, directly attempting to stabilize the complex and chaotic situation in Libya. This has proven beneficial for them as Algeria agreed to increase trade with Turkey, which in turn may increase trade with Italy. In contrast, China has stayed cold on any direct intervention in the realm of nation building, instead opting for longer-term plays with the Belt and Road Initiative, which Algeria has agreed to. The reasoning behind this isn't clear. The most likely explanation is that China hopes to preserve a relationship with Algeria that sits independently from Turkey, which for the most part is a wild card of a nation in terms of its future. This long-term, distanced approach is also beneficial when it comes to Libya, as Libya also has an uncertain future, and as such it's better to observe and wait rather than stir the pot with unintended consequences. But perhaps the most challenging part of all of this is securing the Eastern Corridor, running from Egypt through Sudan and along the eastern side of Africa. While it is evident that a major problem here is the lack of infrastructure in contrast to the other routes across Africa, a more complex problem is the sheer instability of the entire East African region. While nations such as Egypt and to some extent Sudan have stayed on equal terms, countries such as Ethiopia have always been problematic. Ethiopia not only has several political disputes with Sudan and Egypt, including problems with dams and water supplies, but is yet again having to deal with various forms of civil conflict. This is perhaps the biggest issue in East Africa. China has ambitions here, as do the European Union, the Middle East, and the rest of the Western world. But this is a far more complex issue, and one that shifts from day to day based off of the current conflicts and instabilities in the region, which up to this point have been nullified through most of Western and Central Africa. The question at the end of the day, all things considered, is whether or not this is even possible, and if so, will it be as effective as planned? The reality of the situation in Africa is that such trade corridors can only be developed properly in peace times. And due to the scale of these projects, that means peaceful situations across a vast portion of Africa. While this has been taken into account, it certainly doesn't make the situation easier. For example, Somalia has been for the most part excluded from the Trans-African Highway network due to the constant instability. And even then, it's highly likely that ripple effects from these internal conflicts will be felt in Ethiopia and Sudan. As it stands, a recent spout of hostility between Algeria and Morocco is proof of this fragile ecosystem. With Algeria claiming they will cut diplomatic ties with Morocco, such a development will likely have a ripple effect on both Turkey and Italy, due to their close relations with Algeria and the obvious leverage they hold. With that in mind, the potentials made possible by the region's growing demographic means that the likelihood of increased foreign intervention is high and will only increase over the next few years. This initial investment by foreign nations of time and money may be the most important they will make in terms of offshore manufacturing. Sacrifice time and effort in, let's say, Sudan or Libya, and the potential payoff could make all that time and money spent worth it in the long run. Regardless, we are preparing for the biggest power shift towards Africa in recent history, and while the players and outcomes are not exactly clear, the next 2 decades will be interesting to observe. What results from this will not only impact the future of Africa, but also play a key role in the global power struggle between the West, China, Russia, the Middle East, and India. How that will play out, only time will tell.